Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the staggering duality and the actual factual history of Pablo Escobar. We're going to separate the myth from the reality here. Whether you've seen the dramatized movies or heard the countless pop culture references, the true historical account of this Colombian drug lord, narco-terrorist, and politician is honestly way more complex and devastating than fiction. Our goal today is to look directly at the evidence. We really need to understand how one man literally brought a nation to its knees while at the exact same time being revered by thousands as a saint.
So let's start with this absolute jaw-dropping number, $30 billion. By the time of his death, Escobar had amassed an estimated net worth of $30 billion US. Just let that sink in for a second. This massive fortune made him one of history's wealthiest conventional criminals. I mean, he didn't just participate in an underground economy, he essentially built an illegal financial juggernaut that rivaled the GDP of small countries. But you have to ask, how exactly does someone generate $30 billion entirely outside the confines of the law?
Well, he generated this unprecedented wealth through a single commodity, and that's powder cocaine. Through the Medellin Cartel, which he actually founded back in 1976, Escobar essentially monopolized the cocaine trade flowing into the United States throughout the 1980s and early 90s. He established the very first smuggling routes coming from Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, funneling it all right through Colombia. And here's the thing, he didn't just meet a demand. His highly organized infiltration into the U.S. market created a rapidly increasing demand that absolutely fueled his billions.
Section 1. Rise of the Cocaine King. To understand how he got there, we have to look at where he started. Growing up in pretty severe poverty in Medellin, Escobar actually dropped out of high school. Now, he did later try to study to become a criminal lawyer, but a lack of money forced him out. So instead, he hardened his criminal skills right on these streets. He started out small, stealing tombstones, sandblasting the inscriptions off them, and reselling them. From there, he moved on to selling illegal cigarettes, stealing cars, and eventually orchestrating full-blown kidnappings for ransom. He even collected a $50,000 ransom for a local businessman, only to kill him anyway. This ruthless pragmatism, that became his trademark early on. But as the cocaine trade really exploded in the mid-1970s, Escobar realized that street-level crime just couldn't scale, so he co-founded the Medellin Cartel and partnered with figures like Carlos Later to secure a crucial transshipment point. This was a Bahamian island called Norman's Cay, sitting just 220 miles off the Florida coast. And they didn't just use the island, they essentially bought the whole thing. They equipped it with a 1-kilometer airstrip, a harbor, boats, aircraft, and a massive refrigerated warehouse built specifically just to store cocaine. It was a logistical masterstroke that drastically increased their distribution capabilities.
And man, this operation required some incredible global logistics. With Norman's Cay up and running, the volume reached frankly unimaginable levels. At its peak in the 1980s, Escobar was overseeing monthly shipments of 70 to 80 tons of cocaine flowing directly into the United States. To put that into perspective, it wasn't just smuggling anymore. It was a full-scale international freight operation. And this is exactly what heavily funded his rapid rise to becoming one of the absolute richest people in the world.
Which brings us to Section 2, the silver or lead strategy.
So running an empire of this size meant he needed absolute control, right? And the crucial point here is his infamous carrot and stick strategy, immortalized in the phrase plata o plomo, which literally translates to silver or lead, meaning money or death. Escobar systematically infiltrated every single level of the Colombian government. He would offer public officials, police officers, judges, you name it, the silver, just massive bribes to look the other way or actively help the cartel. And if they refused the bribe and chose their integrity, well, they were given the lead. They were assassinated. The cartel even funded political candidates across both the conservative and liberal parties just to ensure they were pulling all the strings from the inside.
Moving on to Section 3, the Paisa Robin Hood. Now, simultaneous to all this extreme violence, he cultivated a very, very different public persona. Impartially speaking, we really have to look at the two incredibly different lives he led. While he was actively terrorizing judges and police, he was also spending millions developing some of Medellin's poorest neighborhoods. He funded low-income housing complexes, built hospitals, schools, churches, and even football pitches. This philanthropy earned him the nickname the Paisa Robin Hood among the locals. And he totally leveraged this immense popularity to enter politics. In 1982, get this, he was actually elected as an alternate member of the Colombian Chamber of Representatives as part of the Liberal Party. This wild position granted him parliamentary immunity and a diplomatic passport.
Section 4. War against the State.
But his political career didn't last. Following his ousting from politics by the new Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Escobar basically unleashed a rapid, violent escalation against the state over the next 7 years. It started when he ordered the assassination of Lara Bonilla in 1984. From that point on, it was just an all-out war aimed at intimidating the government into banning the extradition of Colombian citizens to the United States. Because honestly, extradition was Escobar's absolute greatest fear.
Then, in 1985, one of the darkest days in Colombian history unfolded. Escobar financed a massive assault by the M19 left-wing guerrilla group on the Colombian Judiciary Building, also known as the Palace of Justice. His specific goal here was to disrupt the Supreme Court from studying the constitutionality of Colombia's extradition treaty with the U.S. The siege ended in absolute tragedy. It resulted in 98 deaths, including the horrific murder of nearly half of the Supreme Court justices.
His campaign of narco-terrorism really reached a horrifying peak in 1989. In a desperate attempt to assassinate presidential candidate Cesar Gaviria Trujillo, who had publicly vowed to fight the cartels, Escobar planted a bomb on a commercial airliner, Avianca Flight 203. Now, Gaviria wasn't actually on the plane, but the bomb still detonated, killing all 107 innocent people on board. Because 2 American citizens were among the victims, this act crossed a major geopolitical line. It triggered direct and very aggressive intervention from the U.S. government to aid Colombia in hunting Escobar down.
Section 5. The Fall of Escobar. But even his downfall was entirely unique to him. Facing immense pressure, Escobar struck a deal with the Colombian government in 1991. He agreed to surrender and cease criminal activity in exchange for a reduced sentence and, crucially, a guarantee of no extradition, which had just been prohibited by a new constitution he likely influenced. Incredibly, he was allowed to serve his time in a private, self-built luxury prison called La Catedral. I mean, get this, it featured a football pitch, a bar, a jacuzzi, and literally a waterfall. Unsurprisingly, reports quickly surfaced that he was still running his cartel and murdering rivals from inside this so-called prison. When authorities finally realized what was happening and tried to move him to a real standard holding facility in July 1992, he used his inside influence to discover the plan, and he escaped. This sparked a massive 16-month nationwide manhunt. Finally, on December 2, 1993, using radio tracking technology provided by the United States, Colombian special forces pinpointed his location in a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin. He had just made a phone call to his family. The manhunt ended right there with a fatal rooftop shootout where Escobar was killed by police bullets. He died just 1 day after his 44th birthday. Which leads us to our final section. A bizarre, enduring legacy.
The story absolutely doesn't end with his death. The surreal consequences of his life are frankly staggering when you lay them out. Step 1, his massive luxury estate, Hacienda Nápoles, which once housed exotic animals and a private bull ring, was seized by the government and eventually converted into a public theme park. Step 2, his wife and children, facing immense danger from rival cartels seeking revenge, were forced into exile, eventually absconding to Argentina where they lived for years under assumed identities. And Step 3, well, this brings us to perhaps the most unusual legacy of any drug lord in history.
Yes, I'm talking about the cocaine hippos. Seriously, Escobar had imported 4 hippopotamuses for his private zoo at his estate. When the government seized the property after his death, the hippos were deemed just way too large and difficult to move, so they were literally just left there to roam wild. Over the decades, those original 4 have multiplied into a feral herd of over 40 hippos living in the nearby Magdalena River. They've actually become an invasive species and a genuine ecological crisis, to the point where the Colombian government has actively had to start a program to chemically sterilize them. It is such a bizarre, living reminder of his unchecked excess.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider this final question. How do we reconcile the romanticized pop culture myth, the movies, the TV shows, the music, with the devastating historical reality of his actions? This was a man whose funeral was attended by over 25,000 weeping mourners because he built schools for the poor, but who simultaneously brought his nation to the brink of collapse through car bombs, assassinations, and narco-terrorism. Understanding the true scope of his life is absolutely essential to seeing past that Hollywood myth and recognizing the profound, lasting scars left behind by his $30 billion empire. Thanks so much for diving into this with me.